Something strange happens to the people who become healers. Not the fake ones. Not the ones chasing money or status. I'm talking about the real ones. The quiet ones. The ones who listen more than they speak. The ones people go to in private moments, in crisis, in pain. These are the people who carry everyone's wounds except their own. And if you look closely, you'll notice something nobody dares to say out loud. The ones who heal others often feel broken inside themselves. Not because they're weak. Not because they're unhealed frauds. But because healing isn't a gift. It's an inheritance born from suffering. People don't wake up one day with the ability to soothe others. They earn that ability through years of unspoken battles. The world never tells you this, but the healer archetype is born in the fire of childhood wounds, emotional abandonment, early responsibility, and the silent belief that their own pain doesn't matter. Healers learn to read other people's emotions because nobody ever read theirs. They develop intuition because speaking up wasn't safe. They sense subtle shifts in energy because they spent their childhood monitoring storms. They became strong for everyone else because nobody was strong for them. And the world celebrates them for it. But beneath that strength lives a fracture that never fully sealed. Here's the part nobody talks about. People who heal others automatically become the containers for other people's pain. They absorb emotions that were never theirs. They carry grief they didn't cause. And over time, the weight becomes so familiar they forget it isn't natural. They confuse emotional labor with love. They confuse self-sacrifice with purpose. They confuse exhaustion with meaning. But why does this happen? Why do the healers feel the heaviest? To understand this, you have to understand the psychology behind the wounded healer. Across ancient civilizations, the role of healer was given to the one who had suffered the most. In tribal cultures, shamans were chosen after a life-threatening illness or a psychological break. In Greek mythology, Chiron became the father of healing after being wounded himself. And in modern psychology, Carl Jung said that a healer can only guide others to the depth they've personally survived. Pain is the training ground. Suffering is the initiation. Brokenness is the doorway. That's why healers feel different. They're not observers of pain. They are survivors of it. But here's the deeper truth. Healers often carry an unconscious belief that they must earn love. That love is conditional. That they must fix, rescue, or save someone to deserve being kept. This belief is rooted deep in their childhood, but it follows them into adulthood like a shadow they can never outrun. So they become the emotional backbone for everyone around them. The friend who always listens. The partner who absorbs everything. The stranger people confess their secrets to without knowing why. And slowly, piece by piece, the healer disappears. Not on the outside. On the inside. Their identity becomes built around being useful, not being whole. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Healers rarely ask for help. Not because they don't need it, but because they don't know how. They're so used to being the strong one, the calm one, the grounded one, that the idea of breaking in front of someone else feels like betrayal. They fear being a burden. They fear being misunderstood. And more than anything, they fear letting people see their cracks, because their entire identity is built on being the one who holds everything together. This is why healers often collapse in private. They cry alone. They suffer quietly. They retreat into isolation when the emotional pressure becomes too much. They break where no one can see them because they believe they're not allowed to fall apart in the presence of others. The world taught them to be strong, but never taught them where to put their pain. Now here's the paradox. Healers give the most to others, but receive the least. People assume they're fine because they're functioning. People assume they don't struggle because they don't complain. People assume they're emotionally invincible because they're emotionally intelligent. So nobody checks on them. Nobody digs deeper. Nobody asks the healer how they're really doing. The healer becomes the source, the well, the foundation. And foundations are invisible until they crack. The worst part is this. Healers attract wounded people. Not by choice, but by energetic resonance. The healer's calm presence feels safe to those in chaos. Their emotional intelligence feels magnetic to the lost. Their compassion feels like oxygen to those who are suffocating. And because healers don't want to see anyone suffer the way they once did, they pour themselves out until they're empty. Every healer knows this moment. The moment where they look in the mirror and realize they don't recognize themselves. The moment where they feel drained, depleted, numb. The moment where they realize they've given away so much energy that they no longer have anything left for themselves. But here's the deeper psychological truth. Healers don't break because they're fragile. They break because they've held too much for too long. They break because they've lived in survival mode for years without calling it survival. They break because they've convinced themselves that being needed is the same as being valued. They break because they've used healing others as a distraction from healing themselves. And this is where the danger begins. When a healer becomes emotionally exhausted, they start to dissociate. They overthink. They withdraw. They lose interest in their passions. They feel guilt for needing rest. They question their worth when they're not helping someone. This isn't weakness. It's compassion fatigue. It's emotional burnout. It's the consequence of carrying invisible burdens without maintenance. But let's go even deeper. The reason healers feel broken inside is because they were never taught how to receive. They learned to give. They learned to support. They learned to hold space. But they never learned how to let someone hold them. They never experienced what it feels like to be nurtured without having to earn it. Their nervous system is trained to prioritize others at the expense of themselves. So healing becomes both their mission and their curse. They understand people on a level most never reach. They see patterns others ignore. They feel emotions others suppress. And that sensitivity is both their superpower and their wound. Let me tell you something that may change how you see yourself. Feeling broken doesn't make you unworthy of healing others. In fact, the opposite is true. You're effective because you know pain intimately. You're compassionate because you've walked through darkness. You listen deeply because once, no one listened to you. You reassure others because you know what doubt feels like. You hold others together because you remember what it felt like to fall apart alone. But here's the truth you need to hear. Healers need healing too. Not because they're failing, but because they've finally carried enough. You're not meant to be a constant well of support. You're not meant to fix everyone. You're not meant to absorb pain endlessly. And you're not weak for needing rest, boundaries, protection, or care. The reason you feel broken is because you gave parts of yourself away in moments when you didn't have enough for yourself. You handed out pieces of your heart while yours was still bleeding. You saved others from drowning while you were treading water. You held people through storms that nobody held you through. But you survived. You adapted. You found wisdom in the wreckage of your own experiences. And that wisdom is what people mistake for strength. They think you're unbreakable because you became exceptionally good at hiding the places where you already broke. But here's the final truth. You're not broken. You're exhausted. You're not lost. You're drained. You're not failing. You're depleted. And the pain you feel inside isn't evidence of weakness. It's evidence of humanity. The world needs healers. But healers need healing too. Not later. Not someday. But now. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to step back. You're allowed to put your own heart first. And when you do, you don't lose your ability to help others. You amplify it. Because a healer who learns to heal themselves becomes unstoppable. They become whole, not just functional. Present, not performative. They become someone who heals not from wounds, but from wisdom. And that is the ultimate transformation of the healer's journey. To stop carrying pain and start releasing it. To stop absorbing others and start choosing who deserves access. To stop being the wounded healer and become the healed healer. Someone who no longer breaks in the dark but guides others toward the light without losing themselves in the process. This is why people who heal others feel broken inside. Not because they are broken, but because they've spent a lifetime holding everyone else together. And now, finally, it's their turn. Their turn to rest. Their turn to receive. Their turn to heal. Their turn to become whole.